Hi, welcome back to Mums and Microbes, where we explore the beautiful intersection of mum life, motherhood, the progression to motherhood, and gut health in general. I'm your host, Michaela Keating. I'm a naturopath and a postpartum doula. Today, we're going to be deep diving into the postpartum gut, specifically why it matters, how birth impacts it, and what you can do to support its healing or recovery process, especially relative to antibiotics or C-section births, as these are more likely to damage the postpartum gut. Whether you're a new mom or just prepping for a next postpartum period, this episode will be relevant to you in some way. So let's talk about the gut and why it matters in that postpartum period. So the gut also related to the gastrointestinal system. When we say the gut as a colloquial term, we generally mean the microbiome, depending on the context of the conversation. Generally, I say gut, I mean microbiome slash digestion purposes. But it's not just about digesting food, obviously. It plays a major role in immunity, hormone regulation, and mood. So 70% roughly, some estimates go up to like 80 or 90% even, of your immune system lives or starts in your gut. And it's also home, obviously, to trillions of bacteria, which we know as the gut microbiome. There is so much more research going on about the gut microbiome in the past 10 years plus. It's still scientifically, I would say, a relatively new area to explore, as there's lots of things in the environment that we can research around and affecting the gut. There's obviously things that the gut will show us through that research as well that opens up a whole new area of research. Just kind of depends on what you're focusing on and what you're actually looking for as to what research you're going to get out of that gut microbiome. But heaps of evidence coming out about the gut microbiome, its effects on your life and your health, as well as the environment and your choices effects on the gut microbiome. But in the postpartum period, the gut takes on a few roles. So, regarding digestion and absorption of nutrients, which supports milk production, hormone production, and energy, it needs to be optimal for your recovery. It also needs to be optimal if you're planning to breastfeed or like support another human's life. Regulating inflammation and supporting wound healing. So, whether that is a C section or vaginal birth that perhaps ended in some tearing, and helping if you're breastfeeding, and if you're not breastfeeding, still there is some components of this that will relate to um, bottle fed or formula fed babies too, helping your baby's gut colonize with healthy microbes. So that can be through breastfeeding, that is the most direct path. It can also be through skin to skin contact. And in future, when you're also sharing food with your baby or like kissing your baby, part of that is sharing your microbiome as well. Oral microbiome, gut microbiome, vaginal microbiome. Baby gets it all. They're having a fun time there, but it's very important for setting up a healthy microbiome, which in turn affects their lifelong health as well. Um, so let's chat about like what's going to disrupt that through the pregnancy, birth, postpartum space. Obviously, there's a few big things depending on what you started with in terms of your gut health as well. You've got antibiotics at any point during that process, birth, even preconception, birth, pregnancy, postpartum. Antibiotics will affect your microbiome. It will affect, therefore, your baby's microbiome and potentially their future health as well. Um, Depending on what has happened through your pregnancy and birth, you may have tested positive for group B strep. You may have had issues with surgery or like post surgery infection, or you've had a tear and they're giving you antibiotics as like a preventative. Sometimes they do give them as a preventative, whether there's no actual infection, potentially because the risk of infection is too high and that will result in a really poor outcome. And sometimes that's fine. You can make your own health decisions there. But there's still the risk that antibiotics can create a little bit of imbalance in the gut microbiome itself. Antibiotics are not, unless it's like a topical cream version, they're pretty much systemic antibiotics. So they're going to wipe out your gut microbiome. They're going to affect your vaginal microbiome, your skin microbiome, everything. Um, and if you've already started out with some potentially bad or imbalanced gut microbiome, it's only going to make it worse. and that's what we would call dysbiosis, so where there's an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. If you've had antibiotics or you're experiencing symptoms like bloating, constipation, or diarrhea, like regularly, thrush, oral, vaginal, whatever, lots of mood swings, poor mood, even like depression. Obviously, there's a whole other side of depression with postpartum and pregnancy and all of that jazz because you've got wild hormones. But poor gut health can definitely be related to mood and sugar cravings and things like that. Again, sugar cravings is really interesting in the postpartum space because obviously you're dealing with fatigue, of crazy hormones, trying to breastfeed a child potentially. You're going to be craving some extra calories anyway, and generally the brain likes to go for sweet calories because it's the easy option. It's like fast, efficient energy. So yeah, lean more on the side of the bloating, the weird bowel motions, potentially some other symptoms that may relate to that, but they're the pretty common ones. What else will affect that gut microbiome? We've also got C-section births. Often these will come with antibiotics. It just depends on how your birth went. So babies born via C-section will miss that vaginal exposure unless you do something like vaginal seeding, where you literally just like swab in there and then put it in baby's mouth. And I know that sounds disturbing, but that is what happens during a normal vaginal birth. Humans are gross, mate. Like they're actually, when you get really down to the nitty-gritty stuff, humans are feral. But that's just how it is. So you can do vaginal seeding if you've missed that. If you're not happy with that choice, that's fine. You don't have to. If they're going to be breastfed, generally C-section babies make up for that missed vaginal exposure by the time they're like 12 months to 2 years old. But if you don't breastfeed and you did have a C-section, you can still give that exposure to baby with lots of skin-to-skin contact. Your microbiome on your skin, and when you give them kisses and stuff and just like living with you, is still sharing a lot of that microbiome, even if it's not as direct as the vaginal or breastfeeding pathway. But there has been some links in studies from C-section births followed by not breastfeeding with delayed immune development, a higher risk of allergies and asthma. It's not like an alarmingly higher risk, but it is a higher risk, and more digestive issues in infancy. That, in my personal opinion, has more to do with the formula construction rather than the lack of breastfeeding. If you do end up breastfeeding, and at any point, like even if it was only 24 hours, that is still going to be a massive benefit to your baby. So if you've got some colostrum saved up and you did end up having a C-section birth and like your milk's not come in yet, that would be a good option there. Some formulas are going to be more supportive of microbiome health in infants as well, but yeah, the C-section one's mainly on baby's microbiome, unless you get the antibiotics, and then it's more on your side of things too. But the surgery itself will be a trauma, like it's a big event, and it can cause some issues with slowing down digestion, especially with the lack of movement. And if you did get an epidural before that and you ended up with emergency C-section, like I did, then there's obviously going to be some disruption to the bowel motions and motility. But it should go back to normal, which means your microbiome, if you're eating your regular diet, should go back to normal too. Yeah, basically that. If you have all of those fighting against you, like it's still not the end of the world. There are so many things you can do to rebuild that gut microbiome, which I talk about in other podcasts. I did a podcast called, I think it was Post Antibiotics, something, something. That one has a lot more info than this probably will, just because I don't like to make them too long. But in the postpartum other things that can disrupt that gut health aspect of the gut microbiome and gut recovery from the pregnancy and birth and whatever happened, whether that was C-section, antibiotics, blah, 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 is just stress. Postpartum is a massive stressful period, regardless of the birth method. The stress hormone from the lack of sleep, the disrupted sleep, the constant feeding, the constant stress of like, am I keeping this baby alive, right? Like questioning choices, is going to impact your digestion. It's going to impact your sleep. It's going to like sleep quality. It's It's going to impact your microbiome as well. There has been so many studies that have shown a direct correlation between increases in stress, generally more so long-term stress, but postpartum period can be like 3 months straight of just stressful environment. So I would count that definitely as a long-term stress. Anyway, studies showing relationship between stress itself and a weakening of the gut barrier function. So potentially that's when your gut cells have drifted apart a little bit, and more things that go through your system can get through that gut wall than like wouldn't be able to normally. It's normally quite firm, and there is a lot of control and regulation around what comes through. In a stressful state, everything's weakened. You're more vulnerable. Obviously, having a newborn and going through the whole newborn process, you're also going to be missing a lot of nutrients, just because you're recovering. You're either feeding a baby, losing sleep, or just stressed out in general. So there is some certain nutrients that you might want to look at too. Again, I've done that in previous podcasts. But stress is definitely a big one in the postpartum period that's going to impact your gut health, even if it's only a milder impact compared to like C-section or antibiotics. Moving on to like how to fix that. There's lots of methods as to how to fix the postpartum gut. There's also too many variables as to me to say like exactly what you need to do. Everything will be a bit more individual than this podcast, but I'm just giving you guys some ideas, some very general nutrition-based options as to how to work on your gut health in that postpartum period if you have the mental space to do it. So definitely the gut is resilient. If you go through all of that and you resume your normal diet, like probably 8 times out of 10, the gut will recover its normal gut microbiome status, the one that you had before. And there's some other methods or things that you can do to help encourage that more quickly. But yeah, if you go back to your normal diet and you're not eating like a crazy amount of junk food or anything, or like wildly different to what you were before, your gut will generally go back to its previous state, even if that is maybe like only 90% there. So in terms of diet, there's some things you can do. You can prioritize probiotics. Doesn't have to be an actual supplement. Can be foods like sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt, just standard yogurt. There's nothing fancy about it. Miso, anything with that fermented aspect is going to have some probiotics in it, like live bacteria. You don't necessarily want to go ham on these, but you do want to like include 1 or 2 of them, or even 3 of them, on a semi-daily basis. You can use things like a broad spectrum probiotic or even some Saccharomyces boulardii, especially if you have had antibiotics. That might be a good place to start. But again, that might be something that you need some more individual assistance with. Fermented foods, other live probiotic things, you don't have to have a lot of either. Like 1 tablespoon to 1 teaspoon is enough. See how you respond to it, especially if you did have a lot of gut issues before. Start slow and build up over time. The other thing you can do in the gut postpartum phase that's going to help with your recovery as well as your gut microbiome specifically is eating prebiotic fibers. So these are fiber-rich foods that are going to help either feed the microbiome directly or improve motility and therefore like waste management, which additionally helps the gut microbiome as well. So prebiotic foods that are pretty easy to find and common would be oats, bananas, onions, garlic, leeks, like that family, and legumes. I know a lot of people don't actually eat legumes, and some people don't like genuinely know what a legume really is, which is fine. New foods all the time. Technically you could make baked beans and that would still be a really good source of prebiotics, even though you've got like a sugary source or whatever. Yeah, depends on the rest of your diet, but including lots of fiber-rich foods, making sure you're getting regular bowel motions, especially with the C-section angle, you might need to use some laxatives initially, but it should go back to normal. These are all going to be beneficial at feeding those good gut bacteria as well. Some of those fibers will be indigestible fibers, so they don't necessarily benefit the microbiome other than just moving things through. Some will be soluble and will be fermentable fibers, which are positives generally for the microbiome. There's many other prebiotic foods. I have a blog post on my website if you'd like to look at some more specific prebiotics or learn more about like the types of prebiotics. But you can also support your gut microbiome with things like bone broth and soups and things like that that have meats in them, because that contains a lot of collagen. It contains a lot of glutamine, which is great for repairing the gut. Glutamine's an amino acid that's like the most, I think it was the most popular amino acid in muscle tissue. So gut microbiome, postpartum recovery process, plus bone broth, meat broths, stews, soups, all of that jazz has a lot of water content, lots of minerals, and they're going to help with that recovery process in multiple ways, but also supporting a better gut barrier function, like we talked about. Generally, these are also warming and easy to digest, which is perfect for the postpartum period. Choosing lots of warming, nourishing spices, lots of iron-rich foods, especially if you did have a C-section or did have some issues with like postpartum hemorrhage. There are some herbs that we like to use in the postpartum period too. I generally don't prescribe them too commonly just because food is the easiest option. And if we need to use probiotics, we can. But some herbs that you might want to include maybe as a tea form or, yeah, again, with some further guidance, maybe using them as a prescription volume item. So you can use things like chamomile. I wouldn't necessarily use that immediately postpartum, just in case there is some slowness to the motility, like a bit more leaning on constipation. But you can use things like chamomile because it's calming, it's antispasmodic. So if you've got crampy guts and they're upset, or you just want to help support that digestion with more of like a bitter flavor, chamomile can be really helpful there. Marshmallow root and slippery elm can also be really helpful in that postpartum period. They're going to help with motility, especially after C-section and like that stagnantness of early postpartum. They're also going to be really demulcent or like soothing, nourishing. What's the word? Kind of like when you put aloe vera on a burn, like that kind of goopiness. They will do that inside your gut lining, which helps to protect the gut wall until it can heal and recover and do that itself, produce enough mucin to have that function. Some of these aren't breastfeeding safe, so you would need to check with potentially me or another naturopath to make sure that you're not having herbs that are contraindicated for that time period or for your specific situation. And as long as stress will impact you, your nervous system is also going to be integral to gut recovery. There is a nerve bundle that we like to call the vagal nerve. It runs from the back of your brainstem all the way down and touches like all of your organs in your torso area. It's very integral between the gut and brain connection, and we can use it to support our digestion because when we're stressed, our digestive system doesn't work very efficiently. So using it to help slow us down, to get us into that rest and digest phase rather than a fight or flight response can help with digestion and can help with that microbiome recovery as well. Lots of slow breathing, lots of skin to skin with baby, potentially a postpartum doula or some family support if you feel like you're like needing that and you're going a little bit crazy. Definitely some time outside. Time outside for everyone, please. Good walks are also greenery for nature are also really important or helpful at bringing the nervous system back to that rest and digest phase. It's just one of those animalistic things that humans have still retained because we are animals, like I said. So yeah, in terms of postpartum gut recovery, if you want to use probiotics, you can use food-based probiotics like fermented foods, or you can use some specific probiotics. Again, probably best to check with someone first to make sure that it is actually right for you. Prebiotic foods, oats, onion family, bananas, legumes, berries, pretty much all the whole foods are going to be prebiotic, but link to my website will have a more in-depth prebiotic fiber blog post. bone broths and soups full of rich amino acids that are going to help with that gut wall recovery as well as your postpartum physical recovery. A couple of herbs that you might like to use depending on if you need them and also depending if you're breastfeeding or not. Some of them aren't safe. And then nourishing that nervous system because that's going to help with your recovery in general, but also the recovery of the gut as it can't really recover if you're constantly stressed. And then gut health for Bub, like I said, breastfeeding is ideal as a gut microbiome setup for them. Especially if you did have a C-section, you want to like give them that. If you're able to breastfeed, that's like gonna catch them up to vaginally born children as well by the age of that 12 months, 2 years kind of angle. Obviously, there is some breast milk transference of bacteria as well. So, whatever your gut microbiome is, some of that will be transferred directly through the breast milk as well. Baby wearing or like skin to skin contact frequently in the early postpartum is also great for transmission of some microbiome and trying to limit unnecessary antibiotics. And again, that's a very unique discussion and your choice to make in each specific situation. But if you can avoid them, that would be helpful for a gut microbiome standpoint. Yeah, so again, a lot of that will depend on if you've had a C-section or you needed antibiotics as the like not the depth necessarily, but the volume and frequency of supplements or extra prebiotic, probiotic, fiber-rich foods that you might need to recover your gut, but it will do it eventually as long as you return to a generally healthy whole food diet. If you've had a C-section or you needed antibiotics, there's definitely no negatives around that. Things will work out how they work out, but you can also recover some of that lost microbiome exposure through that postpartum period. So again, yeah, postpartum is not just about the resting part. There's a lot of replenishing that you need to do to prep you as like in terms of recovery, but also your gut microbiome, your nutrient status, your like everything, your stress response, as well as gut microbiome for baby in the various ways that it is built. You deserve that support, and so does your gut. So, yeah, if any of those tips you need some further information or you want some more support around that, please let me know and share your experience with postpartum healing or even postpartum gut recovery, if that's something that you've done, or like just gut recovery in general. If there's any tips that you have personally found most useful, let me know because I like to widen my area of like expertise, especially when it's things in postpartum, because like the mental space is very limited. So if there's something specifically in that postpartum period that really helped you recover, I'd definitely be keen to find out. And if you'd like any personalized support, please contact me. My details will be in the little bio bit. I do naturopathy sessions if you want something specific on your health, but I'm also that postpartum doula that will literally come to your house and cook for you. So I can cook you a prebiotic, fiber-rich meal to help with your gut recovery postpartum. But until then, keep nurturing yourself and your microbiome, and I will see you in the next episode.